My name's Susan James, and I'm a professor of philosophy at Birkbeck College in London. Welcome to my exp. Although Spinoza lived in one of the most harmonious parts of Europe at the time, it was nevertheless, by our standards, politically fairly wild. He lived through the public lynching, for example, of one of the leaders of the Dutch Republic, Witt, and his brother. He saw a number of his friends prosecuted for publishing work that offended church and state. He was extremely familiar with internecine religious and political feuds of one kind or another. And he himself complained of being unjustly branded as an atheist and made notorious because of it. We saw that Spinoza sets great store by this value of fortitude, this philosophical motivation and desire to live together in the light of your understanding and to use your understanding to build relationships with other people and to cooperate with them. But one of the questions that he is particularly interested in is the question of, well, what sort of politics can do that? What sort of state, as he thinks of it, do we need in order to help us live like that as effectively as possible? Spinoza's response to his notoriety was characteristically uncompromising. He wrote a book called the Theologico-Political Treatise, in which he set out two arguments. First of all, he argued that philosophy and religion are separate, and that therefore religion has nothing to fear from philosophy. And secondly, he argued that the state needs philosophy if it's to flourish, but also has nothing to fear from it because the state should have the power to shut down philosophy if it goes off track and becomes seditious. So this was a sort of large-scale political intervention, the largest of Spinoza's lifetime, and this was one of the books that he actually published, and it was met with a great deal of criticism. As to this question of what can the state do to help us live cooperatively, then I think that Spinoza considers a range of answers. A first thing, and an obvious point, is that states have enough power to coerce people into obedience. They can use fear to make us obey the law. And Spinoza doesn't disparage this political tool at all, but he thinks that it should be used cautiously and not too much, because, for obvious reasons, it breeds resistance. Secondly, and this is the subject of a great large chunk of the Theologico-Political Treatise, Spinoza is interested in the way that you can use what he calls imagination, that's to say, our everyday experience of the world and the sorts of stories and fictions, fantasies that we build on it to encourage our own obedience. And here the case study that he concentrates on is Christian and Jewish religion as it's presented through the Bible. There are lots of interesting political reasons why Spinoza chose this case. But at the heart of his discussion is the argument that there are some people, notably prophets, who are remarkably good at presenting the situation that we are in ways that make us see it in a particular light and encourage us to act on those insights. The prophets in the Bible tell us all sorts of narratives about our relationship to God, or rather the relationship of the Jewish people to God. And the prophets have a great effect on what these people do. Moses in particular binds the people together under the Mosaic law and inculcates a culture of obedience to the law. Not entirely, of course, but for the most part. Spinoza says this sort of model is very important for helping people to cooperate. We need to use our imaginative resources to find ways of binding ourselves together. And religion is one of the ways that we do this in the state. But first of all, people are different, groups of people are different, and the narratives that they find persuasive vary from one group to another. So states who want to use these resources should not be too strict about, as well, what stories we have to believe. They should allow as many stories as are needed to make people cooperate effectively.